Hi, this is Dustin Atwood with A1 Custom Car Care. I always try and take a little bit of time each week to sit down and kind of have a discussion about what I'm seeing in the automotive field, even some of the things I'm doing in my personal life. You guys can see a lot of that here on the channel, but here at the shop, every once in a while, you can see typically in the afternoon, I can carve out just a little bit of time that you and I can sit down and have a discussion. So I've been a master certified technician for well over 15 years, professionally doing it, knocking on the door at 25 years now. And I've seen the industry change drastically for many, many years. And I've always had the kind of ability to look past this week, next week, or this year. I think a lot of folks, or at least a lot of technicians, that they look at the week. Okay, I had a good week, I had a bad week, etc. Maybe out there in whatever your line of work is, you see the same thing. I've never really played the short game, essentially, is what I call that. I've always kind of looked at this as a long-term game. So there were weeks where I definitely took it on the chin, and I ended up with, maybe a job that, didn't go that well or was tougher, while I'd see other technicians, run wide open with the quote-unquote gravy work, if you will. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy some easy work as well, but I've never really been the tech that ended up with a lot of that. And with that, that was intentional. And it wasn't that I was just a masochist and I was a glutton for punishment. It was the fact that I wanted to escalate my experience in the industry as quickly as possible. So as a young man, I really didn't start into the business as a lube tech or tire tech, and nothing wrong with lube tech or tire tech. I still change oil and do tire work to this day. I actually really enjoy it, to be honest, where a lot of seasoned, technicians feel like maybe that's, beneath them, if you will. I think it's just as important as some of the high level diagnostic work that I do, maybe not on a daily basis, but multiple times a week, even to this day. I share some videos also of some of the things I'm doing, custom exhaust work and teaching. Here in about a month and a half, I have a training that I'm going to be the trainer for. And so kind of trying to push that school of hard knocks as well as lots of formal training information out to as many people as possible. Not really to the old adage that, hey, I'm the secret keeper of whatever is going to get the job done, or the specialty tool, or the experience. This job's tough enough. So really the bulk of my time now is hopefully spreading some of that very hard fought experience to the rest of my technicians within our company. We have multiple locations here in Missouri and a couple in Northwest Arkansas, but even to other owners and other shops and businesses, and they do that vice versa for me as well, where, hey, sometimes I need to phone a friend, and I really am thankful for the ability or the credibility to do that with people even outside A1 Custom Car Care. And I think that's really important, and I think that's something that's shifting in the industry, or has been for a long, long time. As a kid, my dad worked in a lot of dealerships in the auto body side of the world. I don't have the patience to sand for days on end and make a car look beautiful. My passion has always been to make them stop and go as good, if not better, than they roll off the production line. And I've been very successful at that for many years, and then sharing that information with you all. So a lot of times when I decide to sit down and I've got a few extra minutes that I can sit down and have a chat with you guys, a lot of that's what I'm seeing in the shop. So if you have some things that you feel like maybe I should talk about that the industry needs, or you have some questions that you can't get answers to, please leave them in the comments down below. And if you find the information, helpful or even entertaining, give me a subscribe and be a part of what's going on here at A1 Custom Car Care. And then obviously with, some of the crazy things I do in my personal life. Our channel here is kind of a little bit of a mixture. It's very much automotive focused, but I like to sprinkle in some of the extra stuff, whether it's livestock that I'm raising or some of the crazy hauling stuff that I do. We have a customer actually who's a great friend of the channel. He was giving me some, pointers, if you will, on heavy flatbed hauling, because that's a lot of his experience. And so I had some questions. I had some time to sit down and talk with him a couple of weeks back at our Sunset location, and I greatly enjoyed it. I feel like, the ability or the variety of things that we have a skill set to do is really important. And it's not that I feel like I need to DIY everything myself. I enjoy the automotive field, and obviously I hold 2 different master certifications. So I have really devoted a lot of time and effort and focus into that field, but as well as towing and hauling broken cars and equipment is something that I do. It's probably weekly at this point. I hesitate to say that. There may be a week goes by that I do to where I don't tow anything, and then there may be a week that I tow something 4 or 5 times that week. Or at this point, I'm busy enough that I have some trusted folks that I don't want to say I can contract with, but that's kind of what it is. And they'll go and pick up and deliver things. And I'm really thankful to have that network of people that can help me out when I get in a bind. So I hope you have a good network out there as well, by the way, of whatever it is, whether you're in the construction field, the medical field, the law enforcement field. Having a good group of people that you can rely on, especially in today's day and age, you're a very blessed person if you have that. And I really have been very blessed personally that I have a lot of folks, and I take and maybe do things a little bit too far without asking for help. I bet a lot of you watching this channel probably do the same thing. But I'm learning over the years, sometimes it's not really that you need help, it's that they want to help you. And so instead of absolutely killing yourself sometimes, it's really nice to A, pay it forward and do that thing that maybe somebody needed some help with, and B, allow somebody to kind of come in and help you. The older I get, the more I kind of understand some of these old life lessons that unfortunately a lot of us can't learn it in a book. You have to learn it by typically School of Hard Knocks and doing it the wrong way a lot of times. So as we kind of go in, or I transition really away from some of the automotive repair things, I still work on a lot of cars. You see it here on the channel, diagnostic, repair work, etc. But I'm not a line technician like I had been for a long time. I do it a few days a week, and I do it to teach younger technicians in the industry, which is really important. I hope, A, if you're young getting into whatever industry you have, find somebody that at some point you would like to be in their image, if you will. I don't mean that biblically at all. It's, hey, you don't learn from the dumb guy on your crew. You look at the guy or the lady or the whoever who has the skill sets that you're looking for. You learn from what it is they do that gives them success, and then you pay attention to maybe some of their shortcomings, and God knows I have some. I am very stubborn from time to time, and I'm resistant to reading the directions or, kind of those fine details. And over the years, I have had to consciously shift my mindset that, hey, it's really not worth struggle busting along for a long time if I can pull service information, resources, or whatever, as well as not only am I quick to take resources or dive into the work of resources, I'm also quick to say, hey, I've run into this before, may not be the situation you're at, think about this. And that's really a big culture or part of our culture, not to be in the buzzword of, a lot of industries out there. But there are shops that I have seen, that I know of, and that I've worked at, that everybody's proprietary. If you know a shortcut or a better way to do something, you don't share that. I have no desire to work in or be a part of any of those shops out there that function in that manner. I love the fact that I get a phone call from time to time. One of my techs, one of my advisors, or I stop into one of the shops and like, hey, look at this cool repair that I'm doing here. This is what I learned. Have you seen this? Sometimes, or a lot of times, I'm like, yeah, I've seen this. This is what I did about it. What did you do about it? I never want to get to the point where I know everything. I don't want to be in a room where I'm the smartest guy in the room. It's enjoyable for a short while, but what I've noticed is it's boring. I love the fact that as an industry, and it comes with its own struggles, that the automotive industry changes so rapidly as we go through the industry. It amazes me, to be very, very honest. But it also keeps me guessing. Everything's new. I'm not doing the same brake job that I did in 2005. Do I work on 2005 cars? Sure. There's a ton of them out there. Arguably, they're probably better built cars than 2025, but I digress. But the brake jobs now, I'm hooking up a scan tool. I'm retracting the electric caliper and the piston for the electric parking brake. I'm doing the relearn procedures or resetting those as the service goes through. Now, as I alluded to earlier, my dad was in the auto body industry. So there were a lot of auto mechanics at those dealerships, and they worked, kind of side by side, if you will. I saw, and I've talked about this many times here on the channel, where when that new technology kind of was released or started to come out in the kind of cutting your teeth or learning phase of it, guys didn't like that, or a lot of them didn't. And I say guys because there are starting to be some female technicians out there. Honestly, there's some very good ones out there. I have taken some instruction and training from some top tier drivability technicians that were ladies. The industry is shifting as a whole, and I think that's a great thing. But when I talk about in the history, typically it has been predominantly male dominated in this industry. It's very difficult on your body. It's very taxing, not only mentally, but physically as well. As I get into my 40s pretty good, I'm like, well, I'm not quite as young as I once was for sure. And there's things that I'm more aware of now that I do things differently. But to kind of get back to the technology change or the variety of things that we work on, when I first got in the early 2000s, and I was even into the late 99, 98, 99 as I was getting some formal automotive education, a lot of times when you'd bring a car in, they would have typically one problem or one main concern, because those late 90s cars all the way through the 2000s, even into the early teens, that technology had been out and been refined for a long time. You still had a lot of distributor vehicles, so a distributor that fired all the ignition components. You typically had port fuel injected, which was very refined. You had fixed timing, so no variable valve timing. You typically had an in-cylinder camshaft or overhead valve engine. They were dabbling in the overhead cam engines, but even that wasn't a huge step out of what we were working on and had been used to, and the manufacturers had been developing for decades at that point. That was pretty well thought out, and if you had a problem, it wasn't terribly difficult to get to the bottom of it. So I got in the industry personally at what I think was a really good time. Getting into the industry now is still, I would consider, a very good time, but it's getting more, how do I put this, more complex. So the headwinds to get in and be successful, I believe now are probably higher than they were when I got into it. But the reward, I think, is starting to get better as well, where you're not viewed as, oh, you don't read so well or you weren't the best student, so you're going to be a mechanic. Through the 80s and 90s, there were a lot of mechanics out there. As well as the baby boomers, they predominantly were the ones in the industry that did very, very well. And they're coming and are at the point where a lot of them that had been at the forefront of the industry, and I was sitting kind of in the back of the class, if you will, learning and listening for the last 20 years, and I was really kind of the minority. And what I mean by that is there was a huge gap. There'd be one or two kids that were in their 20s, maybe. And here in Springfield, Missouri, I think we have a population around 225,000. There should have been more people my age or in between my age and the folks that were in their late 40s and early 50s when I got in the business. And it was tough sitting in some of those classes, but it was very much a good time for me to be in those classes, and it accelerated me through my career much, much faster. And so with that all being said, the lion's share of the really high end folks right now, I'm telling you, this is I'm going to release this video probably in about a week, but it's the 25th of March 2025. So we're coming up to the point where everybody was not everybody, but there was a lot of really high end mechanics out there. And so you could go to shop over here and shop over there. And hey, my buddy's got a shop over here. And I drove by 12 shops, and you could stop in there and get pretty good service, if not great service. But those days are drastically changing. And that's one of the things I'm really cautious about here at A1 Custom Car Care is we have a wealth of knowledge, not just in their 50s and 60s. We have some guys in that category that I can still come in and have a carburetor, points, and condenser discussion about. But we've got guys in their 30s and 40s that are definitely at the top of their game or on the ascent up to the top. They haven't necessarily crested over the top. And so we've got a big mixture to where I love to see, we had one gentleman retire a couple of weeks back, been a mentor of mine for, a long time. I really learned a lot from him. And I hope he knows that out there. I don't know that he'll ever see this video, but, when I started going to training, that's how I met him, was he was passionate about training. And so I watched, kind of like what I talked about a little bit earlier, I watched what he did in the industry. I'm like, all right, so that worked out for him. Let me go in that direction. And it opened doors for me that I wouldn't have had opened otherwise. There was a fair amount of volunteer time and even some expense, some personal expense for me to walk in a similar path or shadow that a little bit. But the doors that it opened and the relationships that it built, I would not have gotten otherwise. So I'm really thankful, that when I decided to pick a company to go to work for, I wanted one that would invest in us. So check that box. And then 2, I wanted it to attract the culture of people that I wanted to work with, people that love the industry and that wouldn't come to that technology change and just decide, hey, I'm out, I'm going to go get into a different industry that's a little bit more conservatively as far as change. The automotive industry, that is about the only constant to it, is it changes rapidly. I mean, you think about tires. Oh, they're black, round, and they hold air. Well, not anymore. I mean, you look at the all-terrain, the all-season, the weather, rain-rated tires, different plies, different tire pressure or TPMS system, tire pressure monitoring systems. It's not just a tire repair anymore. And you look at the price of tires. When I was a kid, you could get a nice tire, even for a light duty or medium duty truck, for about $60. I don't know about you guys, but $60 doesn't get me much of a tire anymore. You might get like a 15 on an old S10 for that kind of money, but I bet they're even more than that. So being able to continue to learn, continue to change, that's been very much important to me because I knew this time of where we are right now is coming. And basically, the folks that really knew what they were doing and were at the top of their game, they're getting out. And they're leaving it up to us. And I'm really thankful to be located with the company that I am and the strength that we have within it. I don't talk about ADAS a lot, which is Advanced Driver Assist System. That's your blind spot monitoring, your cruise control, your adaptive cruise control, your lane keep assist, your backup binger to show you, hey, don't back over, little Joey's bike, collision avoidance. There's a lot of shops out there and even dealers struggling with some of that. I had a dear friend, and he's a friend of the channel here as well, have a vehicle that had been to a chain tire store. Why he went there was because they dealt in a certain set of run flats that I don't typically deal in. That's not really my game, but his particular car, that's what it called for, so he was getting that done. While he was there, they're like, hey, and it is a good practice. let's go ahead and align it to protect the tire wear as long as possible. These tires are expensive. Let's see if we can make sure that it's tracking down the road, it's handling, and it's in spec of where it's supposed to be. So clearly it must have been out of spec, because they did the alignment. As he's running home, he had two lights that had never been on in the dash. Well, it was very difficult for me to get that ADAS, Advanced Driver Assist System, recalibrated on this particular vehicle. I spent 6 hours calibrating this. Now, in fairness, they had tried to fix it and they did a battery disconnect on it, which made my life infinitely more difficult, because that pulled power from certain things that I also had to relearn in a certain order in order to get the car to be back in calibration. Now, what if we had left it out of calibration? Maybe that's your question, like, oh, it's just a couple lights on the dash. Let's put a picture of a loved one or tape over it. The problem is there, the problem lies with that there is that now it doesn't know, or it miscalculates where objects are. So maybe your lane keep assist doesn't work like you are used to it working, and so you're running down the road and you're checking your, don't do this by the way, but you're checking your Facebook or your Instagram or whatever it is you do, and you're used to the vehicle keeping you within the white and dotted lines. Well, now that system's not in calibration, so the car that it normally would have spaced you, say, 15 feet from, it views it, it's at, say, 30 feet. Well, now it's thinking it's 15 more feet away than it actually is, and it runs you into that car, or runs you into that guardrail, or runs into the pedestrian, or runs right up onto the back, which this is, I've seen this in case studies where the adaptive cruise that sets the lengths of travel behind or in front of the next car, it runs right up onto the car. You're not paying attention, and it dynamites the brakes and puts you in the window. So all of those systems to be calculated or calibrated correctly are extremely important. So a few years back, I was going to some training. I'm like, hey, we need to invest in this. It's very expensive, by the way. And we did. Now, we didn't do it company-wide. I do my ADAS calibrations here at our Fort and Sunshine location. It is our newest expanded location. You can't barely drive down Sunshine without seeing or knowing that we're here. And we're teaching our staff as we go along. Now, I still participate in some of them, but we have others trained in that skill set that they can make sure they're calibrated correctly. And so I tell you that little backstory, and I appreciate you kind of bird walking with me here to say, if I had found myself in another company that wouldn't have invested in the industry that they're supposedly an expert in, I would have left many years ago. But the fact that A1 Custom has continued to reinvest and reinvest and reinvest, and not only take us from an undercar only facility, which was brakes, maybe some light steering and suspension and exhaust. We were an exhaust specialty shop. I wouldn't have stayed all these years, but I've been here over 20 years at this point, and I'm really proud to share that with you guys, and I still love coming to work to this day. So I hope if you're out there, whatever your chosen field is, that you still enjoy it. And if you don't, life is way, way, way too short not to at least enjoy what it is you do. Now, I'm not saying, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. That's an old saying forever. And at different times, I have thought that that was pretty accurate. And I wouldn't say that I completely disagree with it. However, I love what I do, and I work extremely hard, even to this day. There's weeks that I'm 50, 60, 70 hours in the automotive field, plus attending training on my off time. Not that I have a lot of off time, but I think it's really important to not hate what it is that you do for a living. And thankfully, I've been very blessed throughout my career being a part of a company that takes care and invests in their people, as well as the people love the industry and the company as well. And that really makes a difference. Years ago, and I'll tell a quick story before we wrap things up, we went into a dentist office when I was a kid. And the just aura of being in that office was, I don't want to say it was like gloom and doom, but it was dreadful. And I don't use that word lightly at all. And I can remember being had this feeling all I wanted to do is get out of there. And a dentist, I have learned to really enjoy and appreciate going to the dentist. So it's not a reflection on the dental industry at all. But that particular office, the aura in there was awful. And so you can kind of hear what's going on. It was not a good dentist office. And then at some point while they were working on whoever was back there, a large part of something that they relied on to do their dentistry broke. And they ended up having to send us all away. So we didn't go in and get treatment that day. We ended up finding a dentist, I think in Mount Vernon, Missouri. The guy was awesome. He extracted all of my wisdom teeth and the 2 lower teeth in front of it. So for me to say that guy's awesome clearly means something. He meant business. He was good at what he did. He's kind of a dry sense of humor, but he was good. He was a craftsman in his trade as far as dentistry. Maybe that's an insult to dentists. I don't mean it in that manner. It's absolutely a compliment personally. But I was never so relieved for, whatever divine intervention broke whatever it was to get us out of there. And I always have paid attention to that when I go into homes or other businesses, is what does it feel like as you walk in? Is it really stressful? Do the people that work there hate their job and not want to be a part of what's going on there? Are they negative and terrible people? That's probably not going to be a good outcome for me as a consumer. So you may see us and we may have a bad day or we may have something that goes wrong. But every time you come into one of our stores, that's not going to be the norm. And I have said this, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. You find the character of a person or a business when things don't go right. And that's really what I started talking to you about when we started this podcast today, was I chose the difficult path, and I don't really know why I did that. I saw a much easier path. You could just hang rotors and pads and brake calipers and do light diagnostic work or automotive repair work. That's a lot easier than what I do every day or what I have done for the last 20 years, which is, hey, what's the most difficult, challenging car we have coming in today? I want that one. Or if I see and read on another technician working by me that's struggling with something, a lot of guys or ladies will be like, oh, they're in a bad mood, let's leave them alone. It's in my nature that I have to walk over there and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And sometimes I got to wither the sometimes 4-letter words and why this isn't working and that this is a bunch of poo, etc. And really, I feel like if I've got any superpower at all, it's typically that. I don't take it personally. I've been pretty upset over the years myself at different things. A lot of times it's a mental block, not necessarily a physical block of why whatever's not working. Or as my wife likes to say, did it not bend to your will? It's kind of an inside joke that I feel like I have been doing this long enough. I've been trained extensively. I'm extremely well equipped tooling wise. I don't struggle with my job because I don't have the right tool for the job. That's another thing, but that's a whole different topic that we'll talk about another time. That I feel like a lot of these cars should bend to my will, and I will be persistent enough and stubborn enough that I'm not just going to give up and be like, oh, the next guy or gal can deal with this. My point is that has really allowed me to be tempered in fire, that when things do go bad and I have maybe an upset tech, an upset customer, or a vehicle that is just working me over like I'm on a cheese grater, you know what? It does stress me out. I don't know if you can see it, but there's plenty of gray and a little bit of thinning up there. I've paid those dues. And out of all the years I've been doing this, let me make sure I'm telling you right. I can think of 3 cars that I basically gave up on. And I went to the customer and said, hey, I don't know what was wrong, or I can't figure it out, or this is beyond me. You're going to have to take it somewhere else. Now, I've had people come to me and say, hey, I'm going to have to take it somewhere else because I don't have any more time. I haven't had that happen, but I've had 3 that I gave up on and basically said, look, uncle, I'm done. Because of the training and the ongoing education and trying to keep polishing my skill set, 2 of the 3 cars, I now know what was wrong with them. One of them was a Cadillac with a knock sensor issue, and really that was a confidence issue on my part. I didn't have enough confidence to make the call. I thought it was a knock sensor. Those old Northstar cars had 2 different knock sensors, and they were really expensive in the beginning. And so I sent that one away. I now know what was wrong with it. I had a Buick that would misfire randomly, and I never did understand what was wrong with it until later. It had a ripped diaphragm in the brake booster, and it would go really lean under certain braking conditions, depending where the pedal was, and it would create a lean cylinder misfire or an erratic idle. It would do all kinds of crazy things. And I sent it away thinking, well, I don't know what was wrong with it. So 2 of them I know. The third one was a fuel-injected late 80s Dodge pickup. I have no idea what was wrong with that truck. Dodge and their wiring, especially in those days, let alone their computerization, they probably needed more than just a normal part replacement. And so I sent that one away, and I never did. I still don't know what was wrong with that. If that truck came in today, I don't know that I could figure out what's wrong with it with the availability of the aftermarket and quality of parts. So I feel like that's a pretty good record. Now, have I worked on cars and not fixed them and they came back? Yes, that has happened over the years. Those have been the ones that taught me the most. And early on in my career, part of what accelerated me through my early years into being a good quality technician or a higher level technician quicker was the fact, that when those would come in from other technicians, this is kind of a dirty secret about the industry. If they can push them off on somebody else, they do. And that's a really bad thing about the industry. For whatever reason, what I did differently is because I was so curious, is I'm like, give me those cars. Now, a lot of that was on my own time. I was not being compensated or paid to work on those cars. But for year after year after year, when those comebacks would come in, and I had, sometimes even I would give them my productive work, which sounds really dumb as I say this here to you and I look at this camera. It cost me big time early in my career, big time. But it has paid dividends later because it accelerated me through the experience and the reps and sets that I needed as a hopefully productive automotive technician. If you've watched this video long enough, you're going to see me check my email here. But I hope some of that interests you out there. So what is kind of the moral of this podcast today, if you're still with me? It's that the road easiest traveled yields the least amount of fruit. And it's terrible. And there's times where I still look at the difficult, hard path, and I'm like, do I have enough energy? Do I have enough stamina? Do I have enough willpower? And the easy road looks very appealing sometimes. But it has definitely paid me dividends and still does to this day. And I'm very thankful for all the hard decisions, even though I didn't know why I was making those decisions all those years ago, that I worked on the vehicles nobody else wanted to work on. I worked on the vehicles and stood face to face with the customer who I had just done whatever repair to, and they said, hey, it's doing the same thing or it's got a new problem. All right, I'm sorry. I will get this taken care of. And I hope you're one of those people. If I call on you in a different service industry and we have a difficult problem, that I hope I find one of you out there. So if you have any thoughts or advice, definitely share them. Topics you want to talk about, I'd love to talk about those with you. I greatly appreciate it. We're about 35 minutes in here, and we'll see you next Monday. I'm going to try and do these every single Monday. Thanks for being with us.